Hi everyone! Today we are starting the Odyssey. This is one of my favorite stories because it just has so much going on inside of it. It's got a hero, it's got love, it's got sea monsters, adventure, a sea voyage, all of those things. Now, the Odyssey is a story about Odysseus, who is going to be our hero, and his journey home. It takes him 20 years to get home from the Trojan War, despite the fact that he only lives a year or so away from his home by boat. Now, the Odyssey is a story that is unique because of the way that it began. This story is written by Homer, but it wasn't really written at all. Homer began his career as an author by telling his story out loud to other people. Those people went home and told their children, who eventually told their children, who told their children, etc., etc., etc. Eventually, somebody decided to write it down on paper, but the legacy of the Odyssey is that it's told orally to thousands and thousands of people every single year. Now today we are going to be listening to the audiobook because this is such a rich story that I wanted you to experience it in the way that people have been experiencing it since its beginning. Today you received an Odyssey Part 1 packet from the substitute. Please get it out now. As you listen to the audiobook, I expect you to follow along with your eyes and listen as it reads it to you. During the reading, please make sure you're paying attention very closely, as we will talk about all of these elements again in the future. Also make sure that you're filling in one of your 2 study guides during the reading to help you so you don't have as much homework in the coming days. Here we go.
Unit 5, Epic. Theme 11, Journeys. From the Odyssey, by Homer. Translated by Robert Fitzgerald. Part 1, An Invocation. Poets in Homer's day believed that the gods inspired their storytelling and singing. According to custom, Homer begins his performance with an invocation, calling upon the Muse, the goddess of epic poetry, for help and inspiration. The invocation serves a second purpose, to capture the audience's attention with highlights of heroic adventures that the poet will later describe in detail. Sing in me, Muse, and through me tell the story of that man skilled in all ways of contending, the wanderer, harried for years on end after he plundered the stronghold on the proud height of Troy. He saw the townlands and learned the minds of many distant men, and weathered many bitter nights and days in his deep heart at sea, while he fought only to save his life, to bring his shipmates home. But not by will nor valor could he save them, for their own recklessness destroyed them all. Children and fools they killed and feasted on the cattle of Lord Helios, the sun, and he who moves all day through heaven took from their eyes the dawn of their return. Of these adventures, Muse, daughter of Zeus, tell us in our time. Lift the great song again. Begin when all the rest who left behind them headlong death in battle or at sea had long ago returned, while he alone still hungered for home and wife. Her ladyship Calypso clung to him in her sea-hollowed caves, a nymph immortal and most beautiful, who craved him for her own. And when long years and seasons wheeling brought around that point of time ordained for him to make his passage homeward, trials and dangers even so attended him, even in Ithaca, near those he loved. Yet all the gods had pitied Lord Odysseus, all but Poseidon, raging cold and rough against the brave king, till he came ashore at last on his own land. New coasts and Poseidon's son. The gods are worried. Nearly 10 years have passed since the end of the war against Troy, but one of the greatest Greek generals has not yet returned home. Odysseus has encountered a series of disasters on his voyage, and is now the prisoner of a nymph named Calypso. He has also angered Poseidon, who has prevented him from returning to his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus on the island of Ithaca. But now Poseidon is visiting Africa, and the other gods agree to act behind his back. The poet now tells of Odysseus, who is miserable after 7 years on his island prison. Calypso loves her handsome captive and will not let him go, but she is forced to reconsider her position when she receives a strongly worded order from Mount Olympus.
Okay, so please remember that Calypso is a sea nymph, meaning a lower goddess who lives on an island by herself. She has magical powers, which she has used to keep Odysseus and his men for 7 years. Mount Olympus is the place where all the gods live, so essentially she's received an order from the king of the gods, whose name is Zeus.
Moving in, Calypso helps Odysseus make a raft, and he thankfully departs. But he does not have smooth sailing. Poseidon, returning from Africa, spots his old enemy at sea and shipwrecks him in an instant with a fierce storm. Zeus's daughter Athena intervenes. She casts Odysseus, naked and near death, ashore on the island of Phaeacia. There, a beautiful princess discovers him and takes him home to the palace of her father, King Alcinous. The Phaeacians treat Odysseus as a noble guest and urge him to reveal his identity. At last, he relents and uncertainly begins to tell his gripping story.
Okay, so remember, this story, just like The Shadow of the Dragon, is told almost exclusively as a flashback. We start in the present, where he has arrived at the Phaeacians' palace and is about to tell his story. But now we're going to go back in time, and Odysseus is going to tell you what has been happening for the last almost 10 years as he's tried to get home.
What shall I say first? What shall I keep until the end? The gods have tried me in 1,000 ways. But first, my name. Let that be known to you. And if I pull away from pitiless death, friendship will bind us, though my land lies far. I am Laertes' son, Odysseus. Men hold me formidable for guile in peace and war. This fame has gone abroad to the sky's rim. My home is on the peaked sea mark of Ithaca, under Mount Neon's wind-blown robe of leaves, in sight of other islands, Dulichium, Sami, wooded Zacynthus, Ithaca being most lofty in that coastal sea, and northwest, while the rest lie east and south. A rocky isle, but good for a boy's training. I shall not see on earth a place more dear, though I have been detained long by Calypso, loveliest among goddesses, who held me in her smooth caves, to be her heart's delight. As Circe of Aea, the enchantress, desired me, and detained me in her hall. But in my heart I never gave consent. Where shall a man find sweetness to surpass his own home and his parents'? In far lands he shall not, though he find a house of gold.
So Odysseus is saying that even though he stayed with Calypso and never left of his own desire, he never really wanted to be there. He would have rather been at home with his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus, with his father who's at home. He's saying that he never really wanted to be there in the first place.
What of my sailing then from Troy? What of those years of rough adventure weathered under Zeus? Odysseus relates his first adventure. He and his fleet of 12 ships attacked and plundered the coastal settlement of the Cicones. The raid was a success, but the overconfident men became drunk and mutinous, unresponsive to Odysseus's orders to retreat. The Cicones' army surprised Odysseus and his men at dawn and drove them back to sea with heavy losses. I might have made it safely home that time, but as I came round Malea, the current took me out to sea, and from the north a fresh gale drove me on, past Cythera. 9 days I drifted on the teeming sea before dangerous high winds. Upon the 10th, we came to the coastline of the lotus eaters, who live upon that flower. We landed there to take on water. All ship's companies mustered alongside for the midday meal. Then I sent out 2 picked men and a runner to learn what race of men that land sustained. They fell in soon enough with lotus eaters, who showed no will to do us harm, only offering the sweet lotus to our friends. But those who ate this honeyed plant, the lotus, never cared to report nor to return. They longed to stay forever, browsing on that native bloom, forgetful of their homeland. I drove them, all 3 wailing, to the ships, tied them down under their rowing benches, and called the rest. All hands aboard! Come clear the beach, and no one taste the lotus, or you lose your hope of home. Filing into their places, by the rowlocks, my oarsmen dipped their long oars in the surf, and we moved out again on our seafaring.
Okay, so remember that these people are on rowboats, essentially. Okay, it's a huge boat that you have to row with your hands. They also have sails, but when the wind is not going the direction you want to go, you have to row with your hands. So what Odysseus is saying is that when these people ate the lotus flower, they forgot all about going home and didn't want to leave. So he had to drive them into the boat, tie them down, and force them to leave so that they wouldn't get stuck on this island.
In the next land we found were Cyclopes, giants, louts, without a law to bless them. In ignorance, leaving the fruitage of the earth in mystery to the immortal gods, they neither plow nor sow by hand, nor till the ground, though grain, wild wheat and barley, grows untended, and wine grapes in clusters ripen in heaven's rain. Cyclopes have no muster and no meeting, no consultation or old tribal ways, but each one dwells in his own mountain cave, dealing out rough justice to wife and child, indifferent to what the others do. Just offshore from the land of the Cyclopes is a deserted island with a fine natural harbor. Odysseus and his men spend 2 comfortable nights there. On the 2nd day, overcome by curiosity, Odysseus sails with 1 ship and a crew to the mainland. He wants to see just what sort of creatures these Cyclopes are.
Okay, so a cyclopes is also known as a cyclops. That's a giant person with 1 eyeball. So we're going to see very soon Odysseus' first flaw as a character. So keep your eyes open and be listening very careful.
As we rowed on and nearer to the mainland, at one end of the bay we saw a cavern yawning above the water, screened with laurel, and many rams and goats about the place inside a sheepfold, made from slabs of stone earth-fast between tall trunks of pine and rugged towering oak trees. A prodigious man slept in this cave alone, and took his flocks to graze afield, remote from all companions, knowing none but savage ways, a brute so huge he seemed no man at all of those who eat good wheaten bread, but he seemed rather a shaggy mountain reared in solitude. We beached there, and I told the crew to stand by and keep watch over the ship. As for myself, I took my 12 best fighters and went ahead. I had a goatskin full of that sweet liquor that Euanthes' son Maron had given me. He kept Apollo's holy grove at his Maris. For kindness we showed him there, and showed his wife and child. He gave me 7 shining golden talents, perfectly formed, a solid silver wine bowl, and then this liquor, 12 2-handled jars of brandy, pure and fiery. Not a slave in Maron's household knew this drink. Only he, his wife, and the storeroom mistress knew, and they would put 1 cupful, ruby-colored, honey-smooth, in 20 more of water, but still the sweet scent hovered like a fume over the wine bowl. No man turned away when cups of this came round.
Okay, so this liquor is magical, and so Odysseus has armed himself with this magical liquor in order to try and make friends with the Cyclops. So keep listening to part B video to find out what happens next.